Now, we're going to learn about empowering equity in a different kind of community, one that is not geographically bound. Sharing these strategies is Lisa McLaughlin. Lisa is a social entrepreneur, researcher, co-founder, and co-CEO of Workit Health. She holds a master's of both social work and information from the University of Michigan. She's laid the groundwork in Michigan and the greater United States for effective strategies for on-demand substance abuse disorder treatment and prevention resources for health plans, employers, and individuals. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please rev up your engines in the chat box. Get your clapping hands out. Please welcome, making her way to the stage, here to show you how you can work it, the co-CEO of Workit. She is Lisa McLaughlin. There she is. Welcome, Lisa. Take it away.
Hey. Oops, it is going to double. So I'm going to shout the other one so I don't sound crazy.
Ah, you're good. Good. Great. That was just the sound of everyone echoing your praises. Don't worry.
So I'm going to share my screen, but I'm similar to Chanel. I think it's weird to not see you guys, but it's okay. So give me 1 second here. Take a breath, stretch while I'm switching this up. I was going to I'm a Zennial, so big confession at the beginning of this talk. I was born between 1979 and 1981, and I struggle in the Zoom world, and there's a lot, there is a lot of challenges that occur for me in our new reality. Okay, here it comes. Great. So I really enjoyed everyone's sharing. I was able to hear Chanel and talk a little bit, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit today about substance use disorders, addiction, how diversity, inclusivity, and social justice interplay with delivering addiction treatment. And so there's a saying in inclusive technology communities, nothing for us without it. A lot of social justice communities have used this as a slogan to try to make their voice heard in areas or spaces that are supposed to be for them, particularly areas of funding or types of clinical treatment that are for a given condition. And with addiction, there's been a massive failure that's affected particularly the Detroit metro area, which is that we have been, over the course of my life, my adult life, since I got sober in 2002, in a real state of systemic failure in the addiction recovery community. And this is a controversial statement to make if you're in that community, which I am a member of that community. So I am myself in abstinence-based recovery, have been since I was in my young 20s, and got that way through a mix of privilege in the right circumstances and living close to an academic research center where I got the right treatment. But by and large, 80% of the people that I went to treatment with in the 90s and early aughts did not mesh in the same way with their treatment settings, and most of them are not with us today. And we know part of that is because we've been using in the addiction space a criminal justice lens to drive treatment. So the main ways that people get treatment are usually through probation, having some sort of carrot stick model that's in play. Either CPS might be threatening to take your kids, or you might potentially be losing a partner. But the way that people tend to get sober is not aligned with that. Typically, people have a lot of experiences that add up to a deepening understanding that they don't do that well with drugs and alcohol. And most of the people you see in this slide are people who have, for whatever reason, not fit into the round hole that we've tried to put them into. So in 2015, I started a company with a close friend in recovery designed to rethink addiction care and deliver it without barriers. So there are so many social determinants of health that go into addiction treatment. Can you get there? Do you have a license? Do you have kids that you're taking care of at home? Do you have a job that has paid time off? All of these things influence whether or not you're able to access care equitably in our society. And can you do it without punishment? Like, are you a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, someone who's at risk potentially if you show up in a recovery environment of being stigmatized or losing a job, losing access to something that you've had, developing a criminal record, and then having limited options to pay for treatment because you have limited access to employment. With digital treatment, you're able to remove a lot of those barriers and basically give people through mobile phones access to treatment from home. This is extraordinarily important because in the state of Michigan, for instance, where we have these huge treatment deserts, so areas where there's no treatment centers at all. And then even for those areas where we do have treatment centers, they're often far from where people live. So when we first started Workit Health, we'd have people driving from the Upper Peninsula to the Detroit metro area in their first couple of days of sobriety, which is dangerous and stupid and not clinically indicated, but we had to do because of stigma and because of regulations that have made addiction care delivery really stringent and strict in the country. We also know that harm reduction-based care, it works and it has a lot of science behind it, and there's a lot of proof that if you meet people where they are on their journey and are patient with them, getting where they're trying to go, working through their trauma and helping them deal with their own social determinants of health, then they'll get there. And so today we deliver digital addiction treatment in Michigan, California, Washington, Alaska, and New Jersey that was never available before. So our story was really two women in recovery that came to this as people who had privilege, had access, did okay, survived, and we're looking around going like, why are we still here? Why are most of our friends dead? And it was just the two of us kind of bootstrapping and starting a company in Silicon Valley. I'm from Detroit originally. Today we have 130 employees and we're in over 25 states, and we've really been able to realize the dream of delivering a much more empowered approach to addiction care by starting with the patients at the center and making sure that our needs and our voice and our way of talking about our own condition is front and center. So one of the key things that in technology development is you want to build products that have the people that are using them at the table. A lot of Chanel's talk really got into this idea of being at the table, having your spaces in the community representing the spaces of people who've had specific experiences. What was happening in addiction care is most addiction care treatment services were being designed either by the criminal justice system or were being designed by families who were upset about people in their family, like basically Al-Anon people that were upset that someone in their family had an addiction. And that really shone through in the models. Many of them were punitive or had, someone would send you an impact letter from your family that you would have to read around a campfire in treatment, which is super shamey. And empowered products, the best products that are out there on the market, don't do that and really use a human-centered lens and meet people in a way that puts their guard down, helps them keep them engaged. And so what is empowerment? Does your team have a seat at the table? So when we started the company, we did neither the table of venture capital where we were pitching the business, nor the table of addiction treatment on the science side in the academic community. We really didn't have a table. And today, I think we have a movement and a mission and a community around us that's really driving objectives that are way beyond what we originally envisioned for the company. And what we learned along the way is that if you let diversity and inclusion at your company be driven from your why, and if you get your North Star in place through a summit, some form of getting together as a company around what that North Star is, then everything else from the company drives from that why, and you make better decisions and decisions that are leading towards the kinds of social enterprises that we need in the future. Companies that are really focused on not only protecting their bottom lines, but also protecting the wealth, well-being, and emancipation of all the people that are in their midst. And for us, those whys were about authenticity. They were about respecting each other, about being able to have people with the condition participate in decision-making, a sense that everyone should be included, a sense that if you came into an addiction platform and you were LGBTQ, or you were, a Black person of color, you had any sort of specific social determinants in your intersectional identity that you wanted to see within your healthcare provider, that you should be able to find those in our platform. And we built that over time. Obviously, it wasn't there in the beginning. When we first started the company, there were 3 coaches, and they had to be diverse enough for everyone. But today, we're able to realize that by drawing from people from all walks of life all around the country and matching individuals to people that they see their own recovery experience reflected in. The other big diversity and inclusion effort that we've had at Workit is a real strong emphasis on creating a culture that embraces individual experiences. So in terms of understanding how different my experience was from some of my friends who were African American that went through probation, treatment, criminal, the same circles that I was in, and my experiences and outcomes and consequences versus theirs, there's a real understanding within the recovery community and a reckoning going on that white people go to rehab and Black people go to jail. And one of the big things we wanted to do at Workit is really elevate those experiences, both as people on the receiving end of being those people that ended up getting slotted into treatment and having friends who we hung out with that were at the same parties doing the same drugs, end up in jail, and to speak honestly about that and talk about it publicly and make more people aware of that in continuity. And then also to use the platform that we developed as patients ourselves, fighting over years and years to get a seat at the table and be able to build this company, raise VC when only 3% of VC is raised by women at all. We really see it as a huge obligation of the privilege that we've amassed by going through that process to carry as we climb and to use that platform to raise other people's experiences. So we've started doing that through webinars and having opportunities for Black voices in the community that haven't been silenced, but also haven't been escalated and raised up to the degree that they deserve, be heard on our platform and be showcased as thought leaders and movers and shakers in the space. And that's been a great way to start to build community and learn how to be a more diverse and inclusive organization as we go. So we do this both with our members and employees that are in the LGBTQ population that want to share and have a platform about what it's like to recover in that population. I identify as bisexual, so that's really near and dear to my heart to be able to have that platform, a big part of Workit Health. And then also to have this huge Black Voices in Recovery movement where we're putting new voices out there that haven't been heard before and making sure that they have a wider audience. And I wanted to share some of the testimonials from those groups. So these are from a recent webinar that we had that was just really incredible and stirred up conversations about people from so many different walks of life within the Black community who have had different recovery experiences, both individuals who've come from more conservative communities, where they've had a much more religiously oriented recovery experience, those that have come from the LGBTQ community who felt that they couldn't congeal with religious experiences, and having hard conversations about what those intersections look like. And some of my favorite quotes were, racism is not accidental, it's intentional. This system is broken, it needs to be rebuilt. The hopes that we have for the next generation is that we're able to destigmatize mental illness and pain. And then over all of these quotes, just this huge understanding that there has been this war raged on people, and that has led to the sorts of trauma that make recovery almost impossible. So in terms of having that voice and sharing inequities, one of the things that's hard is that as you're growing a business, especially someone who's coming from a marginalized community that's out there fighting stigma and not in my backyard kind of pushback, to do that and at the same time open the tent even further is challenging, exciting, the work we all show up for day to day. And one of the great things that happened when we started to do this is that a bunch of other recovery organizations more traditional recovery organizations started to do the same. And it had a real contagious effect that we're starting to see ripples across the field on social media, in other, e-commerce and marketing campaigns, just seeing wider diversity represented, which is huge. In terms of how this comes back to our workplace at Workit, we really focus on validating different points of view and active listening, and really designing our jobs and our workplaces to be human-centered. So that comes into also letting our recovery shine in the workplace, living out loud. So people on our Slack channel share their recovery anniversaries, they share what they're struggling with. On a weekly basis, they share what they're working. So whether they're working on their mental health or their heart health or their spiritual health or their physical health, It's an open community where everyone recognizes, even within the workplace and within our human resources department, a need for self-care and for that to be normalized across the workforce. And then that builds on itself and creates this just incredible sense of warmth and inclusion on the team, because you're able to use mental health as a rallying cry and a way to bring everybody together. Now, within startups particularly, there's been this idea of culture fit and this myth of culture fit. And it's something that's gotten really weird and distorted within the startup community. People will share all kinds of viral videos where they'll talk about, you're a startup person if, X, Y, and Z means. What we found is that culture fit can be a tool of oppression. It can be something that you use to basically drive pedigree or different life experiences that only few people have access to, where that's used as a catalyst to drive positions of power within an organization. So on the good side of culture fit, you have somebody who gets your mission, like somebody who's about authentic recovery, say for Workit Health. On the bad side, you have a lot of this pattern matching and bias that takes place within technology field explicitly, and also within the venture capital community, that can take over and lead to the state of play that we have today, where 3% of women can raise venture capital and 1.5% of individuals of color have been able to raise venture capital. And then you have these resulting rigid environments, no room for difference, overlooked potential, versus the great environments that are fueled by inclusivity, where you have inclusion, connection, job satisfaction, positive outcomes. So we'd encourage people as part of Intermittent to think about culture add. When you're bringing people into your community, everything in that process, every engagement, every interview is an opportunity to focus on core beliefs, to focus on people's why, and to get an understanding of what they're trying to drive in their life mission, versus just asking someone if they can use an Excel spreadsheet or if they're familiar with social media or are good at navigating a Zoom environment. And we've been really successful at bringing that lens to our interview process and learning a lot about our employees as we go along. And that's led to a lot of diverse hiring at Workit Health. And then I think in order to do this well, you have to understand the biases in your own current system. So find your own bias and be honest about it. We all have bias. We're all living in a state where privilege, oppression, diversity, social justice are works in progress in all of our lives. And you can find these micro affirmations and microaggressions in the day-to-day, in who gets included or promoted or put up as someone who's representing something as simple as an agile sprint on the development team. And I think when you have a culture that's really open about mental health and about vulnerability, then people are much more comfortable identifying and sharing those microaggressions without being afraid that they're going to be punished or that there will be consequences for doing that. And so we've found a lot of success by just being honest and making mistakes and being honest about our own mistakes, my co-founder and myself. As we've built the company, we made the classic mistake that many founders do of hiring our close friends and family members early on, which leads to a lot of challenges. But we learned from that and created a better company and a better hiring process as a result. And then just to close up, I think would encourage people to build inclusive mental health practices into your teams, into your communities. It's a huge part of normalizing the experience of having a mental health condition. I have a brother who has schizophrenia. I've had addiction and depression and anxiety my whole life, and I still experience, even having now children that are entering elementary school and are being perceived in, by their educators or by administrators as stigmatized when I raise, oh, we've got depression, anxiety, addiction, all of these things in our background. There still is a lot of NIMBY out there, and there's a lot of power in just sharing your mental health out loud and changing that dialogue and normalizing it and making it just weird and abnormal to not share what's going on with you. And I hope that we get to that place soon. Thanks, and I'll jump to the chat now to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, question. What advice do you have for bringing up these issues in the workplace? So we at Workit, we do an AMA. Actually, it's running this afternoon. Ask Me Anything is when the founders of the company come out and have people share all their concerns, cultural concerns, diversity concerns, in an open, anonymous format. And then we answer them on Slack in front of everybody so that you're accountable. I think that's a great tool because it gives people a voice without it being filtered through their manager or through anything else. That's been our most successful strategy at raising issues and then being really accountable to the community for addressing them. Another question, checking on our mental health as a team has been really powerful. How can we start to roll that out company-wide? Any tips for starting that combo? I think what's worked for us is to create a language. So we're lucky because our program Workit has a body section and a mind section and has these sort of built-in tools. But I think if you have a great team summit or whatever you do to build community, sitting down and defining what people's go-to coping tools are can be a great guide to understanding what you as a company then should provide. Like, so if you have a lot of people working on their physical health, providing meditation or some form of fitness program, or having facilitated massage therapists come in if you have a bunch of high stress people, and then just taking cues from what people are working on at your community and then build your programming from there rather than kind of top down. Great, thanks everyone, it's great to be with you today.